Violent video games have encouraged the killing of innocent people for sport.
That was Senator Grassley from Iowa.
Well, there are a bunch of them. This is a really new area for the court. First of all, are video games First Amendment expression? The court has never dealt with that. New technologies create new issues for the court. Also, the issue is, what are the free speech rights of people under 18? That is an unsettled area in the court. And finally, the question is, has the state of California proved that violent video games present such a threat to 18-year-old kids and younger that it deserves a new regime of censorship in the United States?
That's interesting. And Adam, I want to get your perspective on that. There's an interesting opinion piece in USA Today that quotes the American Academy of Pediatrics, and what they say is kind of startling. They say that the connection between game violence and aggression is as strong as the medical association between cigarette smoking and lung cancer.
Because even though the controversy over whether or not violent video games are potentially harmful to users has raged for many years, the Supreme Court even heard a case on it last year. This is the first scientific evidence that violent video games actually do have a detectable effect on the brain.
Sure. I mean, they actually do already have the ESRB rating stickers that are on the box, in fact. I think it's important to point out, I mean, coming at this from a perspective of a researcher, I think that the Supreme Court in 2011 was absolutely right in pointing out that the research that we have has been inconsistent and in many cases methodologically flawed. So it's very difficult to take the research we have on video game violence and apply that to whether it causes societal aggression or...
For the Kantian framework, according to the first formulation of Kant's categorical imperative, a universal rule could state that it is okay for parents to choose what they think is right for their children. In this case, we will allow parents to make decisions that are right for their children, provided that there isn't any strong evidence suggesting what they are doing is wrong. Since there isn't really anything wrong with parents making safe decisions for their children, this universal principle holds. Therefore, parents making decisions about what their children can and can't do would be ethical. According to the second formulation of Kant's categorical imperative, parents that allow their children to view violent media are just deciding what they believe their children can and can't view. Neither the children nor anybody else have been used as a means to an end in this situation. As a result, this action would be considered ethical under Kant's second formulation. Both Kant's first and second formulations agreed that this act would be considered ethical, so the action is ethical under the Kantian framework.
For social contract theory, step 1, the rights involved is that the games rated M for mature and A for adults requires some form of adult or guardian in order to purchase them. Step 2, the rights of the parents and children are involved. Young adults and teenagers who are 17 years and older are able to purchase said games that contain high amounts of violence, but when the parents and or guardians do the same for the younger children, they are technically violating that rule for purchasing video games with these ratings. Step 3. In the end, no one has technically violated the law or right of another person, but the parents who expose their children to the violent content within these video games are their own doing.
For ethical egoism, the action in question is whether to allow children to play violent video games. If the action is allowed, it would produce happiness for the child. There isn't really any way as to whether or not this action would produce unhappiness. The happiness that comes with following this action is that children would get to express themselves in a safe alternative way rather than acting out towards people, which could lead to way more problems than it would. This could allow the child to possibly connect better with other kids because it allows them to have another thing in common, something more than that they can connect with. These ideas would produce ample amounts of happiness for the child because they would allow them to play the video games in this scenario and therefore make mutual connections with other children. This is almost guaranteed to have a positive effect no matter what. It is clear that it is not only ethical, but an all-around a better option to allow children to play these kinds of games regardless of the violent content within them.
According to rule utilitarian, it is always okay to allow your child to play violent video games. By allowing your child to have access to these video games, we are making them happy because in a social setting they are able to keep current with the latest trends in the video game industry, allowing them to have more in common with their peers, leading to lifelong friendships. It is also a good way to express anger without actually harming anyone. If this rule isn't followed, children can fall behind socially, which could lead to them becoming frustrated in social settings, and they won't have a healthy way to release their frustration properly. This could lead to some mental issues later in the future. The option to allow this rule to always be in place is truly the best option, for it will allow children to have the possibility to connect with their peers in a different way and could lead to longer lasting friendships and healthy ways to deal with anger.